Today is September 23rd, and it's very early in the morning. It's about 12:30, and I'm really wanting to get through. I'm very tired, and I probably shouldn't continue trying to talk while I'm tired, but I'm really wanting to get through some of this information. When I was at the hospital, or actually when I was at my house with a doula, and basically I labored there a very long time. I'm not sure how many hours, but it was many hours. Anywhere from, it was most of the day. I mean, she showed up, I think, just a little bit after lunch, noon or something like that. And I think that I was taken to the hospital in the early evening or later in the evening. All I remember is that I spent about half the day at my house with the doula, and by comparison I spent maybe probably a little over half the time at home laboring, and then another half of the time at the hospital. And I didn't actually, out of all of the readings that I'd done, I didn't realize that there are limits to how long somebody should be in labor before doctors are supposed to intervene and decide that there's something wrong. And because I was at home laboring for such a long time, and with such close contractions for such a long time, it was really, the records didn't really represent how long I had been in a very serious state of labor. So it wasn't like I was at home with contractions just, every couple of hours or an hour, every other hour. I was at home with this doula having contractions back to back every few seconds, and I was having double contractions, which is what you get when somebody separates a membrane and induces you to go into labor early, which is what Stacy Stubblefield did. So the contractions were very extreme. And for whatever reason, we stayed at my house for a very long time, I think past the normal point of how long you're supposed to stay at your own house. And I know that the doula called the midwife, and she gave her the instructions of when to go to the hospital. So I didn't know anything about that, the whole contractions thing and how far apart and how long is too long. All I know is that I found out later that, according to a couple of nurses, the time that I was in the hospital alone, just that time, the amount of time that I spent laboring was considered to be too long. So I had an overly long labor. And that was not including the amount of time, which was twice that I was at home laboring at almost the exact same rate, with like the same kinds of contractions coming about that fast and that hard. So by the time I got to the hospital, I was in a lot of pain, and I had wanted to not have any painkillers, but I changed my mind. It was very bad. And one of the nurses said, "Well, you're having double contractions or whatever, where they're back, one right on top of the other." And she said, "This is the worst kind of contraction you can have in labor, because it doesn't give you time, it doesn't give you a chance to take a breath and have a break in between. It's just one after the other after the other." So I had been in hard labor at my own house. Then I get to the hospital, and after another hour or so of that, I knew without any doubt, I knew there was something wrong. And I thought that they were supposed to do a C-section if something took too long or there was something wrong. And I had already told this midwife that my pelvis was narrow. Another OBGYN said it was an automatic C-section. And I believe that Stacy Stubblefield knew. She knew how narrow my pelvis was. And some things that she did in that room were just not normal. She had her hands, at the time, I didn't know what she was doing. I thought she was trying to ease the way for my son to pass through somehow. But I knew it was a bone problem. I knew that my bone structure was too narrow. It wasn't a matter of the muscles relaxing enough. It was that I had a very large baby. You know, maybe if I'd had a 6-pound baby, it might have been easier, maybe. But my son was 8 pounds and 11 ounces, and he was a very big baby for my small frame. And what she did that was a little strange, which I thought about later, is she put her hands inside of me, and I thought it was just to try to get my son out, you know, to help ease the way. But she was manipulating his head and had her hands inside and was like pushing. I almost felt like when she was telling me to push, she was pushing my son back into me. It was almost like I was pushing out and my son should have come out, but she was preventing that from happening. It was like she was pushing in on his head. I don't know of any midwife or doctor that has their hands inside of a woman's birth canal pressing in on the infant's head for an hour. I mean, her hands were inside of me for about an hour. So the doula was there, and all of a sudden, as soon as the doula was there next to Stacy, this doula turned into the Wicked Witch of the West. And she just started to support everything that Stacy was doing, and I realized, as soon as I saw her demeanor change, I knew that my instincts at my own house about her having something to do with the state, I knew my instincts were right all along, and I should have fired her. So now she was in the room, and she was like a witness and a support for Stacy Stubblefield, and I had nobody. My family was all busy. My parents were in another state, and I had wrongly trusted this one woman to be a support. So then Stacy got really weird. I asked for a C-section repeatedly. I repeatedly asked for an OBGYN, for an actual doctor to come in and examine me. And by law, if I'm asking for an OBGYN instead of a midwife in a licensed hospital to have a look at me, I have a right to have that happen, and she refused to get an OBGYN. I think what she didn't want is she didn't want an OBGYN that was there at the time that I was first asking. I think she didn't want whoever that was to see me, because probably whoever that OBGYN was, they might have done a C-section, probably right away. Instead, she waited and waited and stalled and called other people and waited until this woman, I don't know who she was, I know she was Japanese American, and she waited until that woman was at the hospital, and that woman came in and said it was too late to do a C-section. And she kept saying, and she and Stacy Stubblefield kept saying, no, it's just too late, you can't have a C-section now. There was no reason why I shouldn't have had a C-section. They were traumatizing me and traumatizing my son. So, before and after I was asking for the OBGYN, at some point, after she had her hands inside of me for such a long time, she was then mocking me. it almost got into a like a very serious kind of almost a torture thing, where it was like I was isolated in this room and I was at their mercy, and all of a sudden she took a very strange tone, and they both started to harass me. Both she and the doula began harassing me, saying, "Come on, you have to push through the pain. Do you even know what you're pushing for? Don't be so selfish. Stop thinking about yourself. You need to push past your own pain. You need to quit thinking about yourself." They harassed me, said much worse than that. But that's the nature of the things that they were saying to me. While I was not able to get my son out, and my son's vital signs were affected. So then they even had a mirror out, and they said, "Can you look in the mirror? Look in the mirror and see what you're really pushing for." I already knew what I was pushing for. They harassed me, and they were torturing me.